Hey there, you've made it. Congratulations. You've just been born in medieval England. The air is thick with wood smoke. Someone's coughing in the next hovel, and your midwife's best advice is don't eat the mushrooms with faces. You open your eyes to the realities of life. Toothaches by 12, frostbite by 14, and probably dead by 30, assuming the chickens don't revolt first. Welcome to your future. Now let's talk career options. If you're lucky, you might become a thatcher and fall off a roof. If you're unlucky, you'll be a baker and explode in a flower fire. But if you are truly cosmically cursed, you'll become a gong farmer. No, not the musical kind. Gong is what polite medieval society called human waste. You are now a professional excrement extractor. Congratulations on making your parents proud. Your job begins after dark because nobody wants to see your face or know what you're doing. You slink through alleys with a bucket, a shovel, and a 1,000-yard stare. You head toward the cesspits, the privies, the communal regret tubs, the townspeople. They've spent the day turning turnips into future fertilizer. You're the one shoveling that future into a cart. You descend into the pit literally. Sometimes knee-deep, sometimes deeper. Depends on how festive the town's bowels have been lately. It's not a metaphor when we say you're neck-deep in work. It's your Monday, and your Tuesday, and your Wednesday if it rained and everything shifted. The tools of your trade are simple: a scoop, a bucket, and a donkey. The donkey's job is to haul, not judge, but you swear it side-eyes you every time. You scoop, you pour, you repeat. Occasionally you gag. Eventually you stop gagging, but not because it gets better, just because your body gives up on the concept of hope. Believe it or not, you're paid well, relatively. Some towns gave gong farmers higher wages than carpenters. Because while everyone wants a new roof, no one wants to drown in fermented waste. You've got leverage, so to speak. But make no mistake, you earn every coin, every miserable groat while wading through the city's collective digestive history. Of course, safety isn't really a thing. There's no union, no protective boots, no days since last methane-related death sign. Methane gas builds up in cesspits. Light a torch the wrong way and you're skybound in a brown explosion of shame. Some farmers fainted from fumes and never woke up. Others simply fell in, and became part of the job they were supposed to clean. Socially, you are somewhere between untouchable and legend, best told in whispers. People cross themselves when they pass you. Children dare each other to touch your bucket. You don't get invited to feast unless something has gone terribly wrong in the kitchen. But you do have one thing: no one else in town has immunity to shame. And here's the thing. As much as people avoid you, they rely on you. You are what stands between civilization and a cholera party. You are the thin brown line of public health. You keep the town livable, breathable, and vaguely respectable. Without you, the streets would become a river of regret and everyone would be ankle deep in it by Thursday. You tell yourself this at night. As you scrub your hands raw in the river and wonder if your grandchildren will ever know a world with soap. You tell yourself you're important, vital, maybe even heroic. But mostly, you tell yourself to keep breathing through your mouth and not ask what just squished in your boot. Maybe the pit wasn't for you. Maybe you like the outdoors. Maybe your dream job involves wandering through bogs at dawn, ankle deep in moss and despair, searching for living syringes. In that case, congratulations. You're a leech collector. Your tools are minimal ajar. A strong tolerance for blood loss and preferably legs that grow back. Your uniform, whatever rags, you don't mind ruining because today you're wading into the marsh with one goal: let the leeches love you. The leeches aren't hunted. That would be too dignified. No, they come to you. The method is simple. You walk into a swamp and stand there still as a suspicious priest and wait for the blood-sucking to begin. The longer you stand, the better the harvest. This job is a race against common sense. You let dozens of little vampires latch onto your calves, thighs, and anything else they can find, then you pull them off gently and shove them into a jar before you faint. If you're lucky, the leech lets go. If you're unlucky, you yank and it leaves half itself inside, along with a possible infection and a fresh reminder of your life choices. Leeches were medical gold. Barbers, monks, and assorted healers believed leeches could cure everything from headaches to possession. Feeling melancholy? That's too much blood. Put a leech on it. Broken ankle? Leech it. Marital problems? You guessed it, leeches. There were doctors who kept them in special velvet-lined cases as if they were precious jewels instead of ambulatory scabs. These little wriggling miracles sold for good money, which is the only reason anyone ever agreed to voluntarily donate their flesh to them. It sounds simple until you realize that the same collector might visit the same bog day after day, eventually depleting the local supply. which means going further, into deeper bogs, swamps with names like Dead Husband's Hollow or Hag's Elbow, the kind of places where the birds don't sing and the air smells like bad secrets. And there you stand, whistling tunelessly, trying to ignore the possibility that the soft squelch behind you isn't a leech but something older and hungrier. No one tells you how cold it gets. Standing still for hours in wet trousers turns your legs into sad red icicles. Leeches don't care about your circulation. They just care that you're warm meat. Sometimes they crawl up too far. Sometimes they disappear into places that shouldn't have entry points. Sometimes you go home with more holes than you started with and no one thanks you for it. You don't get a parade, you get fever and an infection that might turn your foot black by next week. You could try to protect yourself, wrap your legs, oil your skin, but that reduces yield and the apothecary pays by the worm. So you make sacrifices. You start naming the bigger leeches. You argue with them. You begin to think some of them recognize you. The bond grows unhealthy and still you return. Because leeches pay, not well, but better than nothing. And unlike your neighbors, they don't ask questions or gossip about your smell. They just take what they need and leave you lightheaded and slightly twitchy. You tell yourself this is better than farming. Farmers bury seeds and pray. You stand still and bleed. One of you knows for sure something's happening. The other just hopes it rains. You limp home at sunset half drained and trembling, counting your jarfuls like coins. You've done honest work in the loosest definition of honest. No one cheers, no one cares. But tomorrow, someone's going to slap a leech on a noble's armpit and call it medicine. And thanks to you, it'll be the freshest leech in town. When the rats came, nobody paid attention. They were always there, cheeky little shadows with twitching noses and a passion for grain theft. But this time, they brought gifts. Fleas, so many fleas, more than anyone could count. Not that people tried because they were too busy dying. It started slow with whispers. Then the bells rang, then the coughing began, and soon the world was filled with the sound of people losing their families and their patience. That's when the digging began. You didn't sign up to be a plague barrier. Nobody did. But the town ran out of priests and the grave diggers were either dead or hiding in barrels. So they picked you because you still had 2 working arms and were foolish enough to be visible. Your new job comes with a shovel, a cart, and an ever-growing understanding that you'll never look at a pile of blankets the same way again. The rules are simple. Dig fast, dig wide, don't ask questions, and try not to breathe through your nose. The bodies come in waves. Some wrapped in rags, some with coins over their eyes, some still clutching bread, children, old women, entire households tied together with rope. You try not to think about who they were. Names are dangerous. Names make it real. The carts creak louder than the morning. Some are dragged by oxen, some by other plague barriers too tired to care about the difference. You stack the corpses like firewood. You joke badly because it's either that or scream. You develop a dark sense of humor. You name one cart Mercy and another Tuesday. No one laughs, but that's the point. You learn the signs. The buboes. The blackening skin. The way some still twitch even after they stop breathing. You become an expert in horror. Not the loud kind, no fire or war drums here. Just a slow, wet shuffle of civilization rotting from the inside out. You mark graves with stones. When there's time. When there's space. When it feels like it might matter. There's no glory in this. No last words. No poetry. Just dirt and silence. You dig until your hands blister. You sleep on hay that smells like sweat and fear. You eat in haste and don't taste a thing. Some days, the only sign you're still alive is the ache in your back. That and the fact no one's loaded you into a cart yet. People treat you like a ghost. They flinch when you pass. They throw coins instead of handing them to you. Children cry if you make eye contact. You stop going home. Your family left weeks ago or died. Or maybe they're still there, behind locked doors praying you don't knock. But you keep digging, because someone has to. Because if you don't, the streets will fill. And when the streets fill, the rats return. And the fleas and the coughing and the bells, always the bells. So you sharpen your shovel, you whisper to the silence. You try not to remember that yesterday you buried your neighbor, the one who used to sing about apples. You think you saw her braid in the pile, but you didn't stop to check. Because stopping means caring. And caring is a luxury for the living. Eventually, the dead were buried, the bells grew quiet, and the town remembered it had clothes to wear and smells to judge. Society, ever eager to move on from mass death, turned its attention back to the business of cloth. Which is how you ended up here, ankle deep in a vat of human urine, stomping on wool like grapes with a vendetta. Welcome to fulling, the art of taking freshly woven wool and making it slightly less itchy by soaking it in warm ammonia and pounding it flat with your feet. Not your shoes, those would absorb the shame. No, it's bare feet, preferably calloused enough to not feel the squish. The urine comes from generous donations, not yours, everyone's, collected in jars, buckets, chamber pots, and that one suspiciously dark corner of the tavern. It's aged for maximum potency. Because fresh pee is for amateurs. The vat is stone circular and deep enough to ruin your day. You climb in with the cloth which smells like wet goat on a dare and begin to stomp. Slowly at first, then with rhythm. The goal is to clean, shrink, and soften the fibers. The result is warm yellow and sticks to your shins like shame in liquid form. You hum to distract yourself. Some sing old songs, others mutter revenge fantasies against the rich. The fulling mill is a social place. Several stompers, one vat, and a lot of eye contact you didn't ask for. No one makes conversation. What's there to say? Nice flash technique. Did that bubble just move on its own? You develop silent bonds. You know who stomps hard, who fakes it, who once dropped a rat in the mix and said nothing. The smell never leaves you. It burrows into your skin, your hair, your legacy. Dogs follow you for reasons you don't want to understand. When it rains, you steam like a scandal. Children ask if you're melting. You stop correcting them. You get paid per cloth, not much, but enough to eat. Bread if you're lucky, bread with flavor if you're dreaming. Occasionally, someone offers you a different job, gardener maybe, or grave watcher, but you decline. This is honest work, technically, and nobody else wants it, which makes it yours. Some towns have mills with hammers powered by water wheels, mechanical stompers, but machines don't gossip. They don't judge you for weeping during your lunch break. They also don't stop mid-swing if your foot slips. You once watched a man lose 3 toes and gain a limp that became local legend. They called him Tippy Pete. He hated it. You go home with your legs tingling and your mind blank. You dream of dry things, sand, parchment, clean linen. You wake up damp and yellow again. The cycle continues. Because someone has to prepare the wool for the dyer and someone has to stomp in the legacy of every bladder in town. You don't talk about your work. People wouldn't understand. They'd wrinkle their noses and ask if it's true. You'd nod. They'd say how awful and then complain about itchy tunics. You'd resist the urge to explain exactly what touched their precious sleeves before they bought them. Because if they knew, truly knew, no one would wear anything ever again. There's a church to build. There's always a church to build. It doesn't matter that the town already has 3, and one of them has a leaning bell tower held up by prayer and pigeons. A bishop has declared that God wants another bigger one, with taller walls, with more arches, with enough vertical ambition to make heaven itself raise an eyebrow. And someone has to lift the stones. You are that someone. Or more precisely, you are the moving part that turns the pulley, that lifts the platform, that raises the stone, that builds the church, that saves the souls that avoid the pit that your taxes dug. You are a treadwheel operator, a human hamster, a vertical peasant on rotation. The treadwheel is a massive wooden cylinder fixed high on scaffolding. You climb inside like an offering. It creaks before you even start. Then you begin walking, always forward, always upward. Your footsteps tighten ropes which lift heavy materials, timber masonry, barrels of lime. Sometimes people, but only if they've signed a waiver, which they haven't because this is the 1300s and contracts are for the literate. At first it feels like a staircase to nowhere, but soon your legs start to burn. Your back twinges. Your sweat makes the wood slippery. One misstep and the whole contraption groans in disapproval. If you slip badly, the wheel jerks. The load swings. A stone block might tumble, introducing gravity to the apprentice mason below in the rudest possible way. Nobody claps for you. The master builder calls you wheel meat. The priests call you blessed labor. The pigeons above call you a target. But without you, the walls stay low. The tower stays grounded, and the bishop's ego remains tragically unsupported. Sometimes there are 2 of you in the wheel side by side, pacing in miserable rhythm. You never speak. What's there to say? Nice pace. Hope we don't die today. One of you usually vomits around noon. That's the unofficial lunch bell. They tell you to focus on the glory, to remember that you're a part of something sacred, that your effort lifts the soul of the community closer to God. You nod, smile, and wipe bird droppings from your shoulder. Then you get back in the wheel, because the tower is only halfway done and heaven isn't going to intimidate itself. You go home sore and hunched. You dream of flat ground, of lying down, of a world without altitude. Your calves spasm in your sleep. Your hands grip imaginary rungs. Your neighbors ask what it's like up there. You say it's beautiful, but really, you just want to stop climbing. The next morning, the foreman shouts, "The ropes need tightening. The stone needs lifting." You look at the wheel and it looks back silent and round and waiting. You step inside because it turns. and so do you. They said you had quick hands, a light step, eyes like a hawk, and a nose that wrinkled on instinct. You thought they were complimenting you. Turns out they were recruiting. Now you're crouched in the corner of a bakery, holding a sack and a stick, praying that today's rats are feeling cooperative. You're a rat catcher now. Not the glamorous kind with trained ferrets and ceremonial coats. No, you're the freelance sort. Hired by people who scream when flour bags twitch and whose cheese mysteriously vanishes in the night. Your job is simple: go where the rats are and make them not be there. How you achieve that is up to you. Most days it involves yelling, swinging wildly, and questioning all your life choices. There are no traps. Traps are expensive. You are the trap. The rats are clever fast and probably smarter than the guy who hired you. Some are fat enough to register on the tax rolls. Others are sleek silent and look at you like they read your will. You use smoke sometimes, or dogs if someone's cousin owes you a favor. But mostly it's just you, a stick, and a growing sense that this is not how heroes are made. You crawl through basements, storage pits, thatched roofs, and once memorably, someone's stew pot. You learn to move quietly, to listen for scratching, squeaking, or the soft slap of tiny feet on old wood. You stop screaming when they run up your leg. You learn to scream only when they reach the belt. Rats carry disease. That's the main concern, but not the only one. Some bite. Some jump. Some appear to teleport. You once met a rat with a limp and an eye patch who stared you down and made you leave. You never spoke of it again. People claim they respect you. They say you're a public servant, a guardian of grain, a frontline warrior against plague. But they don't invite you in through the front door. They leave your coin in a bowl and lock the shutters. Children throw pebbles at you, then hide behind barrels giggling. You develop a stoop not from age, but from years of ducking beneath beams and social expectations. Sometimes you get creative. Rat flute doesn't work. Rat stew bait works once. Rat diplomacy, not recommended. You try to train a cat. The cat joins the rats. You try to poison them. The baker's daughter eats the bait. That's the last time you're allowed near anything labeled almond. But you persist. Because someone has to. Because if you stop, the rats win. And if the rats win, they inherit the town. You once caught 17 in one afternoon. You told everyone. They nodded politely and asked if you could leave the room. You go home with scratches, sneezes, and stories no one wants to hear. You sleep lightly, listening for the soft scrabble of tiny revenge beneath the floorboards. You dream of rats in armor, in robes, in voting booths. And still, every morning, you pick up your sack, your stick, and your questionable pride. Because the town may not love you, but they love their grain. And as long as rats love it more, your job is secure, which in this line of work is as close to immortality as you'll ever get. They say royalty is a divine gift, that kings are chosen by heaven, that noble blood flows thicker than sense, and that young princes, no matter how rotten, must never be struck. Which is where you come in. You are not royal. You are not chosen. You are a child with fast reflex, a straight back, and a face they've decided is just punchable enough. You are the whipping boy. It begins in a fine hall with tapestries and tutors and a boy named something like Edward or Lionel or Richard who has never heard the word no unless it was someone else's problem. He's 10 or 11 or perpetually 7 depending on who's asking. He is a terror. He has thrown ink at the bishop, locked the steward in the latrine, and once fed an entire apple pie to a hawk out of spite. You are his companion, his shadow, his moral consequence. When he misbehaves, you suffer. When he lies, you get lashed. When he forgets his Latin conjugations, your back remembers. You are both the guilt and the punishment, all conveniently contained in someone not remotely important. The logic is as follows. Striking a prince is blasphemy. But watching your friend be beaten for your mistakes, that's educational. You're supposed to be his conscience. You're supposed to make him feel bad. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he cries with you, apologizes, even begs them to stop. But more often he watches with a sort of detached fascination like he's studying cause and effect. You learn to read his moods by how tightly he grips the edge of the table when they bring out the switch. There are advantages. You live in the palace. You eat better than most. You can read, sometimes even write. You overhear secrets, court gossip, and once witnessed a duke accidentally insult a tapestry and get exiled. But none of that protects you when the tutor's voice sharpens or the prince accidentally kicks a servant. You flinch at shadows not because they hurt, but because they come with expectations. Other boys envy you. They think you're lucky. They see the food, the clothes, the way your shoes actually have soles. They don't see the bruises. They don't feel the guilt that isn't yours but lives in your bones anyway. You walk upright, but inside you're always curling away from something unseen. The prince gets older. So do you. He becomes taller, louder, more dangerous. One day he might be king, one day he might command armies, sign executions, break treaties with a smile. And you'll remember the time he spilled oil on the priest's chair and laughed until you were whipped raw. You wonder if he'll remember too. You think about leaving, running away, but where would you go? Back to the streets, to a village that forgot your name. You stay because staying is safer than vanishing, and because in a strange, bitter way you love the boy. Not because he deserves it, but because he's the only one who looks you in the eye. No one writes songs about you. No one includes you in the chronicles. But without you, the prince would never have learned limits. Or maybe he wouldn't have learned anything at all. There's fire in your eyes, and it's not metaphorical. It's literal lime dust, and it's burning. Again. You're a lime burner now, which means your days revolve around a kiln the size of a cottage and about as welcoming as the inside of a volcano. You feed it woodstone and occasionally your remaining will to live. The job is straightforward. Take limestone, heat it until it screams, and harvest the white powdery stuff that results. Quicklime, used in mortar plaster whitewash and if rumors are true to dispose of inconvenient cousins. It's valuable, it's necessary, and it hates you. The kiln must stay hot. Always. Day and night, wind or rain, feast or famine. If it cools, the process stops. And if the process stops, so does your pay. So you feed it constantly. Logs, peat twigs, whatever burns. You sweat, you bake, you watch your clothes disintegrate, and your eyebrows vanish in stages. The dust is everywhere. It coats your hands, your teeth, your thoughts. It clings to your skin like guilt. You cough and it comes out white. Your nose bleeds chalk. Your lungs feel like dry bread. You know the other burners by their raspy wheeze and distant eyes. No one talks much. Conversation stirs the dust. People avoid you, partly because you smell like scorched regret, partly because one wrong breath from your tunic could give someone spontaneous asthma, but also because everyone knows lime is dangerous. If it touches water, it boils. If it touches your skin, it burns. If it touches your eyes, well, you stop worrying about reading. You wear gloves when you can, cloth wraps, maybe a scarf if you're feeling fancy. It doesn't help. The heat gets through everything. You once saw a man's boots melt. He kept walking, said the pain meant he was still alive. No one argued. The kiln has moods. Sometimes it roars like a beast. Sometimes it hisses like a lie. Sometimes it just waits. You learn to listen, to feed it gently, to coax the stone into changing without making it angry. It's like baking bread if the bread could explode and the oven wanted you dead. When it's ready, you scrape out the lime. It comes out pale and ghostly, soft as ash and just as lethal. You bag it, seal it, stack it. You pray no one spills any near a well. You pray no one ever uses it wrong. You pray mostly that your lungs hold out another week. You go home, gritty and blinking. You drink water and hope it doesn't hiss when it touches your lips. You dream of snow clouds, milk anything white that doesn't kill you. You wake up coughing and it's still there. In your hair, in your chest, in your life, and tomorrow you'll stoke the fire again. You never asked for war. You just wanted bread. Maybe some cheese if the cow was in a good mood. You paid your tithes, ignored politics, and kept your head down. Then one morning, the river started growling. Not with thunder, not with storm boats. Long ones, narrow, decorated with teeth and dragons and a lack of subtlety. The kind of boats that don't float down the Seine unless something unpleasant is about to happen. They called them Northmen, but they didn't come from any direction that made sense. They came with axes, with beards, with voices that sounded like gravel choking on more gravel. And suddenly, Paris wasn't a city. It was a menu, and you were somewhere between starter and urban seasoning. The bells rang. Of course they did. Bells always ring when something goes wrong. You didn't have a sword, you had a broom, and a very strong instinct for hiding behind barrels. You watched the priests panic, the nobles shout, the guards sharpen rusted things they hadn't used since last year's pig uprising. Everyone agreed something had to be done. Nobody agreed on what. Someone said to pray. Someone else suggested fortifying the gates. Someone built a very enthusiastic pile of manure behind the abbey wall. You're not sure if that was a defense mechanism or just panic farming. Then they arrived. The Vikings didn't knock. They roared, they climbed, they set fire to things that weren't flammable until suddenly they were. They weren't just soldiers, they were efficient, loud, cheerful in the way only someone who's very good at pillaging can be. You watched from your attic as a man in furs laughed while carrying a goose under each arm and a barrel of wine on his back. He winked at you. You still think about it. Paris tried to fight. It really did. Arrows were fired. Oil was poured. Brave speeches were made in front of crowds that had already run away. But the walls weren't high enough. The soldiers weren't sober enough. And the invaders didn't seem interested in following rules. One of them surfed a church door down the flooded street like a drunk god of war. You tried to help, briefly. You threw a chamber pot from a window, it hit a monk. You went back to hiding. Eventually, the strategy shifted from defend to negotiate, which mostly meant finding someone who could speak the same language and didn't start conversations by growling. Gold was offered, threats were exchanged, more wine disappeared. At some point, someone handed over a cart full of silver just to make the shouting stop. You thought it was over, that they'd leave, but no. They liked Paris. It had roofs, it had chickens, it had terrified citizens who screamed interesting things when chased. They stayed, camped, sang. You lay awake listening to a drunken chorus in a language that sounded like someone punching a bagpipe full of gravel. Winter came. They didn't leave. Spring came. They were still there. You adjusted, learned a few words, nodded politely when they borrowed your fence to roast a boar. One of them fixed your cartwheel. You offered him soup. He called it too wet. You took that as a compliment. Life went on, sort of. The fear never fully left. The smell certainly didn't. But you survived. And when they finally packed up and left, for reasons no one quite understood, you didn't cheer. You just sat on your roof, looked at the river, and wondered what city they'd visit next, and whether they'd send your goose back. Someone said it would cleanse your soul, that a pilgrimage was good for the spirit, that walking across half the kingdom with blisters the size of boiled eggs was the best way to get God's attention. You weren't sure about that, but you were sure your cousin was watching your goats too closely and it seemed like a good time to leave. So you packed what little you had, crusty bread, a dubious sausage, a water skin that leaks when insulted, and a small wooden carving of a saint who looks vaguely confused. You joined a group of fellow penitents, none of whom seemed particularly holy, but all of whom looked like they owed someone money. The road was long. It was always long. You walked through mud, through rain, through villages that charged for the privilege of not being chased by dogs. You sang hymns until your voice cracked, then mumbled psalms and hoped no one noticed when you forgot half the words. Your feet hurt, your back hurt, your soul presumably was somewhere 2 miles behind you, gasping for breath. Every stop brought a new shrine, a new relic, a new opportunity to kneel in front of something pickled in glass and pretend it wasn't a goat's tooth. People wept, you stared, you tried to believe. Some said miracles happened. You said nothing and adjusted your boot, which had fused with your sock and possibly your foot. At night, you slept in barns or under trees or in makeshift shelters that swayed alarmingly in the breeze. You snored next to pilgrims who smelled like wet rope and mumbled in Latin while they dreamed. You shared food or traded it or watched rats carry it away. One man claimed his apple had been blessed. It turned out to be fermented. He sang for 3 hours and tried to marry a fence. Bandits were a constant worry, but so was everything else blisters lice. Wolves suspicious monks' food that moved. You kept walking, not because you were devout, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant realizing you were 30 miles from anywhere that made sense and had lost sensation in one leg. The holy sites were impressive if you ignored the smell. Candles, icons, velvet hangings, bones in boxes, always bones. Someone once claimed it was the femur of a saint. It was clearly a chicken. You didn't argue. You just nodded, kissed the glass, and hoped that counted. You confessed your sins to a monk with ears like spoons and a patience forged in purgatory. He listened, nodded, then gave you 3 Hail Marys and a warning not to covet your neighbor's sheep. You hadn't technically, but it was too late to explain. Eventually, you reached your destination, the big shrine. The one with a line that stretched through 3 counties and smelled of garlic and wet wool. You waited, you prayed, you touched the sacred reliquary, which rattled suspiciously. You were told your sins were forgiven. You tried to feel lighter, but mostly you felt hungry. The walk back was worse. Your shoes disintegrated somewhere near Rouen. Your water skin finally gave up entirely and became a hat. You shared a blanket with a man who snored the Lord's Prayer. You lost a toenail and gained 3 stories you'll never tell your mother. When you finally saw your village again, it looked smaller. Your cousin had sold your goat. Your house smelled like someone else. But you stood taller. Not because you were holier, but because you could finally sit down and not move for the rest of the season. And if anyone asked yes, the pilgrimage changed you. You limped in and you hobbled out. That counts. The crown is heavy, they say. But not as heavy as the silence that follows a royal fork paused midair. You know this silence. You live in it. You are the reason it exists. You are a food taster. You eat so the king might live. And sometimes you die so the king doesn't have to cancel lunch. You didn't choose this job. No one does. It chooses you like a sneeze or gout. Maybe you worked in the kitchen, knew the difference between wine and rat vinegar. Maybe you once identified mold correctly. Maybe you were just standing too close when the steward muttered, "We need someone expendable with a working tongue." Your job is deceptively simple. The royal meal arrives. A dish is set down. You sniff it, it's prod. It make a face like you're contemplating art. Then you take a bite. Everyone watches. You chew, you swallow, then you wait 15 seconds of polite, terrified silence. If you're still breathing, the king digs in. If you fall over, foaming dinner is rescheduled. You've learned the signs of bad days. Too many sauces suspicious. Guests from the east even more suspicious. A sudden change in cook. You start drafting your will. Your tongue has encountered every spice, every fish, every mushroom that might be a hallucination waiting to happen. You can identify poison by bitterness, tingling, or the sound of your heartbeat increasing like it's racing to the afterlife. You keep charcoal on hand. Some say it absorbs toxins. Others say it just gives you something to clutch dramatically while collapsing. You've developed an impressive gag reflex not to avoid death, but to avoid second servings. Once the duck was so oversalted, you staged a mild faint just to end the meal. The king never thanks you. He nods, occasionally. Once he said, "Good lad," but that was during dessert, and he might have meant the pudding. You're not sure. You cling to it anyway. It's all you have. The worst part isn't the risk. It's the unpredictability. Some poisons take hours, some mimic indigestion. Some do nothing at all and let paranoia finish the job. You once convinced yourself you were dying from an olive. It was just old. You made peace with your gods for nothing. You don't eat for pleasure anymore. Meals are strategy. Every bite is a gamble. You cut food like a surgeon. You sip wine like it's snake venom. You keep notes, roasted pigeon, slightly weepy. Survived, quince tart, suspiciously enthusiastic color, mild hallucinations. Avoid cook with twitchy eye. When you sleep, you dream of menus, of forks clattering, of a king whispering, "Try the gravy." You wake up sweating mouth dry and inspect your tongue for signs of doom. And yet you return. Every day. Because you're good at it. Because no one else dares. Because somewhere between survival instinct and masochism you found a niche. Because someone has to die for the main course. And if it's not you today, well, bon appetit. You're armored, gleaming, magnificent. A mountain of metal on a horse that resents you. Children cheer. Trumpets blare. Somewhere a noble claps politely. And then the lance hits your ribcage like a divine punishment, and suddenly you're rethinking every decision that led to this point. You are a tournament knight, not a war knight, not the type that conquers castles or leads charges into muddy glory. No, you're entertainment, a galloping spectacle, a half-ton meat comet dressed in heraldry crashing into another man at full speed for the amusement of people who've never worn a helmet in their lives. You began with dreams, honor, chivalry, glory. You ended up with concussions. The armor is real, heavy, loud, smells like boiled horse and your own fear. It takes 4 squires to get you into it, and 1 monk to get you out. You can't scratch anything, can't hear anything, and once spent 10 minutes stuck in a privy because your codpiece jammed. Your horse is expensive and smarter than you. It knows when the crowd cheers. It also knows when you're about to get flattened. You call it valor. It calls you the idiot in the tin can. You try to bond, it tries to bite. Training is brutal. You ride, you charge, you hit wooden targets that don't scream, then you upgrade to men who do. You practice falling gracefully, which is code for not dying on impact. You drink vinegar to stay awake and wine to forget what you broke yesterday. You've had bruises in places scholars haven't named yet. Then comes the tournament, flags fly, merchants shout, the crowd bets on who will be unhorsed first, nobles drink spiced wine and shout advice they've read in poems. The field is churned mud and dropped teeth. You lower your visor. The world narrows. Your opponent lowers his lance. He's smiling. You both know someone's about to hit the ground and hope it's not the one who owes the baron money. Impact is instant. A thunderclap. Your chest caves in slightly and your lance splinters like angry furniture. If you stay on the horse, the crowd cheers. If you fall dramatically, they cheer louder. If you land in a puddle, they throw coins. You wonder if you can make a living just from theatrical collapses. Victory means a wreath, a kiss from someone noble adjacent, and maybe an extra turnip at dinner. Defeat means your squire carries you off the field like a sack of regrets. If you're lucky, nothing's broken. If you're unlucky, your shoulder's backward and someone's asking how soon you can remount. But you do it again and again, because tournaments are the only place left where a knight matters. Where your name is announced, your colors flown, your bruises admired. Out there in the real world, you're just another sword for hire with a limp. In here, you're a symbol. A battered, wheezing symbol who can't remember which day it is but still symbol. And when they shout your name, When the crowd roars, when the trumpet sounds, and your horse launches forward like vengeance in hoof form, you forget the pain. You forget the cracked rib, the loose teeth, the ringing in your ears. For about 8 seconds. Then you remember everything, all at once. The gate doesn't look like much. Just a slab of wood, a few iron bands, and a tendency to groan like an old man with secrets. But to you, it's everything. You are a gatekeeper, the first face visitors see and the last person they blame when things go wrong, which is often. This is a medieval city. Things are always going wrong. Your shift begins before sunrise because apparently danger is an early riser. You unlock the gate, check the hinges, and make sure no one stuffed a beggar into the drainage again. Then you stand and wait. That's 90% of the job. Standing, staring, pretending you know what you're looking for. The job description says inspect arrivals. What it means is judge people based on mud level facial twitch ratio and how many chickens they're trying to smuggle under a cloak. If someone's got a cart full of turnips and shifty eyes, you stop them. If someone's got a sword and confidence, you wave them through and pray he's not having a bad day. You ask questions, state your business. What's in the sack? Do you have plague? Most people lie. You nod solemnly and pretend you believe them. Once a man said he was carrying spices. It was clearly rats. Another claimed his uncle was sleeping in the wheelbarrow. The uncle farted and apologized in Latin. You let them through. You don't get paid enough to argue with family dynamics. On quiet days, you count carts. On loud days, you count how many times people scream, "Let me in," while banging on a gate. You closed 5 minutes ago because the sun dipped below the wrong cloud. You've turned away drunks, preachers, jugglers, and once a man trying to sneak a goat disguised as his wife. You are almost impressed. Everyone thinks you have power. You don't. You have instructions. No beggars. No strangers after dusk. No chickens unless pre-approved. The mayor hands you decrees. The guards ignore them. The nobles override them. When something goes missing inside the walls, someone asks, who let them in? You raise your hand. They sigh. Sometimes you get to ring the alarm bell. That's the highlight of your month. Not because it's exciting, but because for once, people listen to you. For about 10 minutes. Then they go back to yelling about tolls or arguing over whose mule bit whose cousin. You return to your post. You sigh. There's no glory in this. No songs, no feast. If you do your job well, no one notices. If you sneeze at the wrong time, half the town thinks you invited barbarians to dinner. You wear a tabard that doesn't fit, carry a spear you haven't used in 4 years, and maintain the patience of a saint or a man heavily sedated on boredom. And yet you show up every day because someone has to keep the idiots out, or at least slow them down enough to yell for help. You take pride in your gate, in its stubborn hinges and dramatic creak. It's not just wood, it's a line between chaos and slightly more organized chaos. You stand at that line, and sometimes that's enough. You light the world. Technically, in reality, you make it slightly less dark and a lot more smelly. You are a candle maker, but not the fancy kind with beeswax and cathedral contracts. No, you deal in tallow rendered animal fat that burns slow, flickers sadly, and smells like hot regret. Your day begins with procurement. That's a nice word for gathering carcass scraps from the butcher and boiling them until they surrender their grease. You stir the cauldron like a witch with low standards. The smell is biblical. Acrid sour thick enough to chew. It clings to your skin, your clothes, your soul. Birds won't fly over your shop. Children cry when they pass. Once the fat is liquid, you strain it through cloth and pour it into molds. Repeatedly. Because good tallow candles need layering. Dip, cool, dip again. You hang them in rows like lumpy wax stalactites, each one a tiny torch of bodily consequence. You've burned your hands so many times you've forgotten what not stinging feels like. The blisters have names. The wicks are made from twisted hemp or old linen strips soaked in salt water. You once used your cousin's tunic. He still doesn't know. The candles themselves are stubby, squat, and slightly offensive to look at. But they work. Mostly, as long as you trim the wick and ignore the sputtering noise they make when they're angry. People buy your candles because they have no choice. No one likes tallow, but beeswax is for nobles, churches, and people who pronounce Latin out loud. Your customers are practical. They light one in the corner, grimace, and mutter something about sin and necessity. No one invites you to festivals. You're the reason they can see their soup, but also the reason it smells like boiled hoof. Your shop is on the edge of town, downwind next to the tanner and the man who talks to pigeons. You've embraced your status. You wear a scarf soaked in vinegar and a permanent scowl. It's easier that way. Sometimes you get creative. Add herbs to mask the scent. Rosemary, lavender, thyme. Doesn't help. Just makes it smell like a sick goat fell into a garden. You tried shaping a candle once. Gave it curves. A monk saw it and fainted. You were fined for blasphemy. Wax is clean. Tallow is honest. It's cheap, ugly, and relentless, just like most of medieval life. You provide light, not for celebration, but for survival. People don't thank you. They just squint less. You're the background glow of every late night confession, every backroom deal, every terrified prayer during a storm. And when the sun sets and the world turns black, someone will strike flint, light your work, and curse softly, which in your line of business is basically applause. You're not a doctor, you're not even a barber. You're lower than that, somewhere between traveling miracle and localized disaster. You are a tooth puller, a man with iron tongs, questionable hygiene, and a talent for making grown adults scream in 7 different languages. Your practice is mobile: a stool, a rag, a sack of tools that rattle ominously. You set up in town squares, outside taverns, or wherever the groans are loudest. You wear a colorful coat to seem festive because no one willingly approaches a man in brown with pliers. You shout your services like a jester, threatening dentistry, cavities, curses, rotten gums. One tug and you're free. Your patients come reluctantly. They're desperate. Swollen jaws, blackened molars, breath that smells like heresy. They ask questions like, "Will it hurt you laugh?" Not kindly. Then you say, "Only for a moment," which is technically true because most of them faint halfway through. There's no anesthesia. That's for nobles and myths. You use distraction, loud drums, strong ale, or one time a puppet show. Didn't help. The child cried more than the man losing his molar. You've tried numbing herbs, but they mostly just make people vomit in your lap. Your tools are simple forceps, clamps, a hook shaped like disappointment, and a cloth to catch the inevitable regret. Everything is iron, slightly rusted, and mysteriously sticky. You claim it's for grip. The truth is, you don't know how to clean them properly, and the local blacksmith is terrified of you. The technique is mostly twist and yank. Pray the root gives up before the patient does. Sometimes the tooth breaks. Sometimes the jaw cracks. Once you pulled the wrong tooth, shrugged, and offered a discount. The man couldn't argue. He had no teeth left. People watch your work with the same fascination as a public hanging. Children cover their ears. Dogs howl. You're a spectacle, a necessary horror. The church tolerates you because even saints can't fix molars, and infection waits for no sermon. You charge by the tooth, double for molars, triple if the patient bites you. You carry a pouch of extracted specimens as proof of your efficiency. Some are black, some are yellow, one glows faintly green. You don't ask questions. At night, your hands shake, not from guilt, from vibration. It takes strength to yank a stubborn incisor from a skull with the density of firewood. You wrap your fingers, drink vinegar wine, and mutter to yourself like a man whose dreams involve too many open mouths. You tried kissing once. It didn't go well, but you keep going. Because tooth pain doesn't sleep. Because no one else will do it. Because even the worst job is better than letting rot crawl into someone's brain. You are not loved. You are not trusted. But when the agony starts and the jaw swells like a curse, people run. Not to the priest, not to the healer, but to you. And you greet them with a smile full of your own teeth and a pair of tongs you sharpened on a whim. Because someone has to be the monster that saves them. One pull at a time. You arrive when the screaming stops. Not because it's safe, just because it's quieter. The birds haven't returned yet. The crows have. You are not a soldier, not a hero, not even a gravedigger. You're what comes after the final sweep of humanity's tantrum. You are a battlefield collector, the one who cleans up what glory leaves behind. No one tells you the details. They just point. Out there over the hill, past the burned trees and the shattered wagons. Bring them back. What's left of them? Pieces if necessary, names if possible. You nod, pick up your cart and your hook pole and start walking. The first thing that hits you is the silence. The second is the smell. Iron rot, dirt, and something that doesn't belong in this world. You breathe through your sleeve, doesn't help. You learn not to gag. It wastes energy and announces your location to rats. The bodies lie everywhere, twisted, broken. Some clutch swords, others reach for nothing. A few stare with wide eyes and mouths still open in surprise like they died mid-sentence. You try not to look at faces. You focus on boots, on armor, on what might be salvageable. You strip what's valuable coin dagger intact fingers. Anything the looters missed. Sometimes they're still warm. Sometimes they move. You poke gently. If they groan, you drag them back. If they scream, you call for the healer who probably won't come. If they ask for water, you give it. If they ask for their mother, you lie. You're good at lying. You stack them in the cart, neatly if you can. Few parts in one side, whole ones in the other. Once you filled a sack with just arms. You didn't know what else to do. You marked it left mostly. The chaplain blessed it anyway. You found letters clutched in hands, locks of hair, tokens, charms, broken flutes. One had a chess piece tucked under his tongue. You don't ask questions. You pocket the ones that don't feel cursed. You leave the rest for the crows. No one thanks you. Not the lords who ordered the charge. Not the families who collect the corpses sobbing through linen wraps. You're just the man with the cart. The man who doesn't flinch anymore. The man who knows that armor doesn't protect from stupidity and banners bleed like anything else. You've buried hundreds. Dug trenches when the ground wasn't frozen. Marked graves with stones or sticks or nothing at all. Sometimes you sing, not hymns, just noise to keep the silence from eating you. Sometimes you talk to them. Apologize, joke, swear. You found friends. Neighbors. Once your brother. You didn't cry. You just wrapped him tighter and placed him in the middle, where he wouldn't roll. Then you finished the job, because the job never waits. The next field is already smoking. You wash with vinegar, sleep badly, dream of flies and red puddles that stretch too far. Your hands smell like rust. Your boots never dry. But you show up, because someone has to gather the dead. Someone has to honor them, even if it's just by moving them out of the mud. You are the end of war's sentence. The last word it forgets to speak. The sun dips and everyone retreats into homes, into taverns, into prayers whispered quickly so the darkness doesn't hear. That's when you start. You, the lamplighter, the flickering guardian of alleys, of corners where people would rather not be. You carry fire on a stick and a bucket of oil that smells like Poseidon's laundry basket. The oil comes from whales, or something that once swam. You're not sure anymore. All you know is that it coats everything. Your hands, your boots, your dreams. You've stopped smelling it, which is worrying because everyone else hasn't. Your job is simple. Climb the ladder, open the lamp housing, pour, light, pray, climb down. Move to the next one. Repeat 37 times. By the end, you're slick sore and only slightly flammable. You've caught fire twice. The second time someone clapped, you didn't appreciate it. The lamps are metal cages on wooden poles designed by someone who never had to maintain them. Hinges rust, glass cracks, birds nest in them. Once a rat leapt from one and bit your face. You've worn a scarf ever since. People assume it's mysterious. It's not. It's scar tissue and deeply personal rage. Children follow you sometimes. Not because they like you, but because your silhouette looks like a walking threat. They whisper legends that you're a ghost or a cursed monk or a man who eats matches. You encourage this. It keeps them from stealing your ladder. The fire is unreliable. Wind fights you. Rain mocks you. One moment, the wick catches beautifully. The next, it sputters like a dying thought. You curse softly. You curse loudly. You curse inventively. At some point, you realize you're arguing with the lantern and losing. Your schedule is precise. The lamps must be lit before full dark or else people panic and start accusing each other of witchcraft. You tried being early once. A merchant threw spoiled fish at you and said the gods don't need help. You disagreed, quietly. Behind a barrel, you light the wealthy quarter first. Not because they're more important, because they're more litigious. Then the market lane, then the alleys where the drunkards gather like damp laundry. Then the riverfront, where the fog breathes and whispers and makes you question your life choices. You save your own street for last, out of spite. At dawn, you retrace your steps and snuff the flames. Your pole has a hook for lifting, a twist for turning, and a dent from where you once used it to fend off a goose. You check each lamp quietly, judging your own handiwork. One went out early, one burned too high, one is missing entirely. You don't ask questions anymore. People don't notice the light. They only notice when it's gone. Then they scream, trip, blame the devil, blame you. You nod, apologize, and mutter something about damp wicks. They don't understand. You don't explain. It's better that way. You go home reeking of oil smoke and disappointment. You sleep lightly. You dream of flames that refuse to die and ladders that stretch into nothing. You wake up before the sun, because darkness doesn't wait, and someone has to push it back, one lamp at a time. You don't fight, you don't ride, you don't even carry a sword. What you have is wind lungs like bellows and a brass instrument the size of an angry goose. You are the hornblower, the tower sentinel. The human alarm system, with questionable job training and an enormous responsibility, make the right noise at the right time, or else. They don't let just anyone near the horn. Not because it's sacred, because it's expensive, loud, and if blown improperly, can summon panic fire brigades or the mayor's mother-in-law. There are 7 different blasts, one for invasion, one for fire, one for noble arrival, one for someone stealing the town's ox. You once mixed up 2 and accidentally declared war on the bakers. It was not well received. Your tower is tall, too tall. You climb endless stairs every morning with a satchel of dried fruit and regret. At the top is the horn, heavy, coiled like a serpent with indigestion. It smells like spit and metal and every decision you've ever made. You polish it, you dust it, you whisper to it like it's listening. You think it is. Your job is mostly waiting, watching, clouds drift, birds circle, people get smaller. You squint for bandits' fires raiding Norsemen or anything that looks like it might interrupt commerce. You've reported geese more times than you'd like to admit. Once you blew the horn for a fast approaching shadow. It was a merchant with a large hat. Timing is everything. Blow too soon and the guards run in circles. Blow too late and the wine gets stolen. You practice rhythms in your head. You hum warning cadences while chewing dried apple. You once sneezed into the horn and caused a stampede in the fish market. You apologize, loudly, into a different horn. People recognize your work. Not your face, your blast. That's a 3 short 1 long, they say. Fire in the west quarter, or 1 rising, 1 falling noble, incoming hide your daughters. You take pride in that, even if your name is never mentioned. Weather is your enemy. Rain makes the horn slippery. Wind turns every note into a whimper. Lightning once struck the tower and made the horn play itself. You fell down the stairs that day and invented a new emergency signal. Thump, followed by screaming. You don't speak much to others. You live above them. Literally. You watch their lives unfold like tiny theater. You see lovers, fight traitors, cheat dogs, steal bread. You hear laughter, argument, songs. None of it involves you. You're the note in the sky. The sound that tells people to run or kneel or close the gate. You've blown the horn for births, deaths, fires, floods, and once a runaway cart full of cheese. That last one earned you a pastry. You framed it. It's still hanging in the tower. When your shift ends, someone climbs to relieve you. You nod. Silently, hand over the horn. Descend slowly, your knees creak, your ears ring, your lips still buzz from the last alarm. And as you walk through the city, you helped warn no one notices you. But they hear you, and that's enough. No one wants to be the devil, but someone has to wear the horns. And this year, it's you. Not because you're evil, not because you volunteered, but because you lost a dice game in the tavern and the priest said, well, someone has to embody sin. You were chewing stale bread, now you're Satan. The costume is heavy. Wool suit, animal bones, and a mask carved by someone who clearly had unresolved issues with goats. You stink like fear and mildew. Children scream. Dogs attack. Old women cross themselves so hard they sprain fingers. You try to wave politely. That makes it worse. Your job is ceremonial. Allegedly. You run through the village during the Feast of Purification or the Festival of Saint Regretful or whatever holy excuse they've invented this year. The point is, you are chased, beaten gently, pelted with vegetables, symbolically punished so the town can feel morally tidy again. It starts with a sermon. Long, muddled, full of fire and sin and parables about sheep who didn't listen. Then the drums start. The villagers gather. The priest blesses a turnip, and suddenly you're sprinting through alleyways with cabbage flying past your ear. Someone throws a beat with alarming accuracy. It hits your shin. You stagger and a child kicks you for Jesus. You're supposed to resist temptation, which means yelling things like, I am darkness, or the harvest is mine in a theatrical voice. Last year's devil used Latin and scared a monk into tears. You try boo and trip on a chicken. It is, as the elders say, a learning experience. They catch you eventually. They always do. You fall dramatically into a hay bale. The crowd cheers. A pig snorts approvingly. The priest declares the village cleansed. Someone hits you with a leek for good measure. You're dragged to the center square, tied loosely to a post, and symbolically banished. A boy shouts, "Go back to hell, you carrot sniffer." It's unclear if that's part of the script. Afterward, they untie you, hand you a cup of watery ale. Someone offers a roasted onion in apology. You sit by the fire, bruised and steaming, and listen to the villagers laugh about how good it felt to face evil. No one asks how you feel. You smile anyway. You know, next year's devil will be the cooper's cousin. He cheats at dice. You wash off the soot, hide the horns, your ribs ache, your pride limps. But for a moment, you were important. Not liked, not respected, but necessary. You made people feel virtuous just by existing loudly in the wrong direction. You were the sin they could outrun, and the scapegoat that bit back once. Only once. They still talk about it. It begins, as all terrible ideas do, with a decree. The Baron has declared a grand harvest festival, a celebration of abundance, unity, and the vague hope that winter won't kill everyone this year. All citizens must attend. All professions must contribute. No exceptions, especially not you. You don't know who you are yet because everyone is here. The candle maker arrives first, trailing the scent of boiled tallow and despair. He set up a mood lighting tent that makes everything look slightly on fire. Next comes the tooth puller, sharpening his pliers on a turnip and offering free extractions with every cider. A monk faints at the sight. The hornblower announces each guest with a blast that sounds like a cow being surprised by lightning. No one understands the signals, so people just keep ducking and clapping at random. Someone claps at the pig. The pig takes it personally. The tournament knight clanks into the square, resplendent in armor that hasn't been cleaned since spring. He nods solemnly at the gatekeeper who's been stationed at the festival entrance, asking if anyone is secretly a wolf. So far, 4 people have said yes. None of them were joking. The lamplighter stumbles in late, smelling of whale oil and burned optimism. He offers to light the celebratory bonfire, but instead sets fire to the mayor's hat. The devil impersonator uses this distraction to steal a pie, then trips over the battlefield collector's cart, which contains what appears to be someone's uncle. The food taster is crouched behind a haystack, muttering to himself and dipping every piece of bread in vinegar before chewing with deep suspicion. That apple blinked, he says to no one. No one contradicts him. The pilgrims arrive in a ragged line, singing hymns off-key and looking like they've walked through 7 moral crises to get here. One of them hugs a tree and refuses to participate. Another tries to marry the roast goose. A third has fused to their own sandal. The town crier stands on a barrel, attempting to recite the official program, but is drowned out by the flock of geese released for entertainment. One goose makes eye contact with the tournament knight and charges. He retreats into a barrel. The devil is cornered by children with cabbage. The tooth puller loses a bet and has to pull his own molar. The lamplighter sets another hat on fire. The battlefield collector mutters, "At least they're still moving," and casually moves his cart back a few feet. The baron arrives at last, drunk on optimism and plum brandy. He announces the festival a success and demands a dance. The hornblower provides music. It sounds like the concept of music being dropped down a well. And yet beneath the soot, the vinegar, the bruises, the faint smell of onions and poor choices. Something magical happens. People laugh. Bread is broken. No one dies. Not even the goose, though it gets promoted to honorary town guard. You, whoever you are, stand in the middle of it all. A part of the chaos, the absurdity, the noise. And for one moment, you're not the bottom rung. You're not the afterthought. You're not alone. You're just medieval. And somehow, that's enough.